Hi everyone, I'm here with Kristin Kilmer of Kristin Kilmer Wellness and Kristin Kilmer Design. Delighted to be interviewing her about how she has had incredible results reversing her Lyme disease. Thank you so much for affording me your time and us and everyone, because I think what you're about to share is going to be pretty life-changing for some people.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, and I'm such a fan of you, so I'm grateful to be here and grateful to share my story.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome. So let's roll. Can you give us a little insight into your story? What happened? How did it start off? When did it start? And
yeah. Well, it was a mystery to me how it started for a long time. You know, it was kind of buried in my unconscious, and you know, I was always symptomatic. Even from the time I was in my early teens was when it really kind of onset. But even earlier than that, I had strep throat like 8 times in 1 year. And of course, back then they just dose you with antibiotics. They take out your tonsils and your adenoids. And then, you know, it took me kind of like a life review a couple of years ago to realize that I was actually bit at camp when I was like 9 years old.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, I was at, you know, it was in the middle of the summer, huge rainstorm in the Midwest. I'm from Wisconsin. It's very prevalent there. And there was no cell phone service. They couldn't call my parents. And I just sat there with a fever for 3 days, just shivering. But no bullseye, because, you know, you can get bit back here and no one notices, or so a lot of people don't get the bullseye rash even. So that's when my immune system started to go down way back then.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what were you bitten by?
A tick. So deer ticks are the most common carriers, but now they're saying flies, mosquitoes, animals. They even say in certain cases it can be considered sexually transmitted. So it's more of an epidemic than people, you know, really realize, and mainly because it's so often misdiagnosed. I mean, has 100 different symptoms. Every single Lyme patient has a different set of symptoms and illnesses. Like, it's a very unique kind of disease, and it hides, and it's, you know, it moves around, and it's tricky. It's a very tricky kind of disease and illness. Yeah.
So what are the symptoms typically?
What aren't the symptoms?
Right.
I mean, that's the thing. So, you know, for me, it was a lot of like really, really extreme fatigue. A lot of like, then, you know, to anxiety. So a lot of times people would consider me bipolar. And severe depression. And then it would get into my joints. And then what really affected me was the endocrine system. My hormones really got out of whack. Even from, you know, the time I was in my early teens. I remember being 15 years old, and I was in the height of my volleyball season. So it wasn't like I was screwing off and not doing anything. I was working out rigorously every day, training, and I gained 30 pounds in a month.
Wow.
You can imagine as a teenager, that was just devastating. And back then they just didn't have the sophistication for thyroid testing. So like, you know, let's, you know, just do THS panel. And that's really not enough anymore. Never was, but so they never just figured it out. So it was like, okay, go to a doctor, go on antidepressants. And, you know, I remember my mom took me to a psychiatrist, and she obviously had the best intentions for me. I mean, it wasn't, you know, that's just what they knew back then. And so I remember the doctor putting me on antidepressants, and they were so strong. I was like almost hallucinating, and I just threw them out. But then I would always then I had mononucleosis, which is also, you know, Epstein-Barr virus is a big part of Lyme disease. And, you know, I'd be in bed for a week at a time, a lot, and even through my teens and 20s.
Damn.
Yeah.
So you've suffered a long time.
Long time, and then it got worse in my 30s. Yeah. But I was I'm a very strong I'm a very highly sensitive person, but I'm also have a very strong constitution. So I just like learned how to push through things. I mean, I remember when my design business was really, really busy, I would, you know, work from bed. My assistants would be downstairs working there, and then I would muscle to appointments and just sob in the car in between appointments, and then put myself back together and then sob. And then sleep all weekend. There was not a weekend I was in bed for a weekend out of every month for probably 5 years, and just didn't let people know. Just disappeared on the weekends, you know.
My goodness.
Yeah.
It puts my suffering into perspective.
Yeah, when I don't, you know, this is probably the first time that a lot of people are even going to know this story about me.
Oh, really? Right.
Yeah. So my close friends would know, and you know, it was a lot of suffering, and then you know and the thing with Lyme is it can also be cyclical, you know, so you could feel good for a couple months, and then you could just be taken down, and then, you always, and then I can work out and act like a normal person. So everyone's like, well, there's nothing wrong with you. You look really good. That's always a big thing in the Lyme community. Well, you look good.
So you're fine.
There's nothing wrong,
And you mentioned chronic fatigue. Was that spoken about as chronic fatigue syndrome at all? Or?
I was misdiagnosed as chronic fatigue. Fibromyalgia was one of mine, hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, bipolar. Someone even tried to say that I had borderline personality disorder, polycystic ovary syndrome. Doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor for years and years and years. Yeah. And a lot of people didn't even know that I was even doing this.
Yeah.
Even close friends. I had certain friends that I could tell, other friends were my fun friends, didn't want to let them know. And then that was also a thing, like you're in so much pain, so you're self-medicating. So, in my 20s, it was a lot of drinking. It was a lot of other types of experimentation just to get out of my body and feel good. And, some things led to a good path, some not so much. But it always led me to a healing path. Everything, was meant to be. I do know that.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I guess there must have been a tipping point for you to go, right, how am I going to go about healing? I mean...
Well, the tipping point was hitting rock bottom.
So when was rock bottom?
So rock bottom was, I think, probably the late 2000s. Everything in my life was just the stress of life. Stress is really the killer. I mean, we know this with cancers and everything, and I just couldn't manage the stress anymore. It was after the market crashed, so my business was not doing well. I had a heartbreak. My house flooded, which was my home and my office. I had to move those, and then I moved into one house. It was mold, so I had to move again because mold is the devil.
Yeah, toxic
devil
mold
for Lyme disease and any type of other illnesses. So I had to get out of there. Immediately got into a car accident, smashed into a bus.
Damn.
So trying to avoid a biker, smashed into a bus, and that really onset things. And then I had to move again. Then I had to move my office again. And then my mom got Guillain-Barré, was paralyzed from the chest down. So it was just this perfect storm of stress after stress after stress. And my body was just later,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing how that stress and trauma can be the kind of the root cause of so many illnesses, kind of.
Huge. It's huge.
I've been learning a lot about trauma recently from a friend of mine called Anahita, who refers to chronic pain of 3 years. And she'd been kind of, thrown or suggested to take different drugs, antidepressants, narcotics, painkillers. And she went on her own journey and realized so much about the mind-body connection. And once she understood this, she was able to reverse it very fast.
Yeah, it's really, really powerful. And it sounds like a very similar story of what I went through. And then, you still have to constantly address the traumas that come up from it,
Yeah. So how long do you think it's taken for you to kind of, I guess you call yourself, would you say you're healed, reversed?
I would like to say it, One thing, the reason why, and that's the stress, the reason why it expresses itself so profoundly is because of the stress. A lot of the top chronic condition doctors think that we all carry the Lyme spirochete bacteria in our bodies.
Interesting.
And it's just whether or not our immune systems are strong enough for it to lay dormant or express. So, and I will say, Parkinson's, ALS, Alzheimer's, all of these, the top doctors have not, in 5 years, have not found one patient without the Lyme spirochete bacteria in their brain and spinal cord tissue. These bugs eat your brain, and that's a whole other portion of it. Plus, you get the co-infections that go with it. So there's even a thing called Lyme rage, where you just get overtaken. And no matter how much yoga and meditation and mindfulness, I went from seminar to self-help to this to that to try to improve things. And just if this thing overtakes you, you're just powerless.
Yeah.
And that was very humbling for me because I'm I'm doing all the work. I don't get it. And then you go into this victim mentality and this just downward spiral.
Victim mentality is huge, isn't it?
Yeah. Why me? That list goes on and on. So that's also a really big part of the healing process too.
Definitely.
Yeah. So it really took, you have to attack at all angles, but then after a while you have to stop going to a war and you have to just focus on building health and healing. There's kind of a shift that has to happen. It's just kind of like Mother Teresa says, I won't go to a anti-war rally, but I'll go to a peace rally. You kind of have to have that mentality of that dance of both.
Yes.
Yeah.
Focusing on what we want rather than what we don't want,
Yeah.
rather than not on what we don't want. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's huge. So you mentioned like the neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and there's also, they all have to have inflammation as well, and chronic inflammation. Do you know what role inflammation has played in Lyme disease?
Yeah, bad. I mean, like you get so used to being in pain that you don't even notice. I mean, even one of my doctors even pointed out to me, she's like, Kristin, it's time to like not push through things anymore. She's like, and just let your body, because I was just so used to being in pain. But yeah, that's absolutely a huge part of it, which is why stress and diet's a huge portion of healing.
Yeah. So talking of diet, what would you say has been, I imagine you've been following a pretty anti-inflammatory protocol. What would you say is the main things you kind of removed from your diet, should we say?
Sugar is the devil. Unfortunately, it tastes so good, but luckily we have a lot of alternatives now, and desensitizing yourself to sugar also really makes a big deal.
That's
another one.
Yeah, gluten's huge.
Yeah, and sorry to all vegans, but when you have a chronic illness, grains they really have to go unless they're from a really, really good source, and you soak the grains and you're really mindful of how you food combine with them. But I really had to take a ketogenic, paleo diet is probably one of the better ones for Lyme. Obviously, there's bioindividuality and everyone's different. I do a lot of vegan cleansing. Like I'll do raw vegan cleansing like twice a year.
Nice.
So
for how long?
About 28 days. Last time I went a little longer.
Okay.
35. It just depends. Now my big thing is intermittent fasting. So,
nice. So ketosis, ketogenic diet, paleo, and intermittent fasting.
And awesome. Higher fat,
High fat, yeah.
Awesome. Which I'm still working through. Like I'm working through the psychology of that one, because part of the trauma that I had with Lyme is that like I would just gain 20 pounds like out of the blue. You know what I mean? And when I'm in the middle of doing hot yoga every day and cleansing, and it just was very humbling. And so I have to work through kind of that whole process too. And my body is like, showing up that way a little bit. Like I started it and I started to gain weight just because of the psychology. So there's a lot of layers. There's a lot of layers here. Yeah.
So just talking about the grains, because obviously paleo is no grains, but you noticed something very interesting when you went to Europe. Now this is, my European friends are going to love this.
Yeah.
What happened?
So, and I also think there's an emotional component. So I'll just preface with, when I tell my clients, it's like, it's kind of a 90-10. People say 80-20, I would say 90-10.
Me too. Yeah.
But in the summer, I'm going to go, maybe I'll go 75-25, a little bit. It just really depends, because sometimes the stress of depriving yourself of something is worse than actually just having the piece of whatever.
Yes.
If you're on a really intense cleanse, obviously, or you're in a really intense chronic condition, you really got to be disciplined. But when you're where I was, where you're at 80-90%, live a little. So this summer I was with friends in Europe, and I started with all these really healthy foods. And when I was in Croatia, and like their healthy salads was like some red onion and some corn, whereas we can go down here and have this like bountiful variety of different vegetables and seeds and flowers and everything. I mean, we're really spoiled in California.
We are very spoiled.
So and then I was like, everyone's like eating these amazing dishes, and this is like so underwhelming. So I'm like, oh well, I'm like, oh, can I have a bite of your pastry? Can I have some of your ice? And it was just like, then it just became this free-for-all for all of us, And I was like, why don't I feel bad? And I didn't have any symptoms. And I thought originally that I was just in so much joy, because, I think when you eat things with joy, you're not going to, and you're not stressing out about it or feeling guilty, that definitely also plays a role.
Yeah.
But at some point you're going to hit it. If you're going for too long, you're definitely going to start feeling some bad stuff.
There's only so much happy you can do.
Yeah, there's only so much happy. So I came back here, and it was like a week. I kind of got back on the, my strict kind of protocol, and then I was like, oh, well, I'll just have a little, and like the difference is just night and day. I mean, even our organic food here is not as good as some of the food in Europe. It just isn't. We have just bastardized our land, and it's really, really sad. And that's another part of it. I would say you have to supplement here. It's a non-negotiable. Just eating, even if it's the healthiest organic food, you've got to at least have a mineral supplement or something.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
That's a huge point. The soils have just become so depleted in all the nutrients So even if you were to have a wide variety of vegetables and fruits and even the animals that graze on the soils or the soils provide, we're not going to get the nutrients, micronutrients, enzymes, minerals that we'd normally get if the soil was rich.
No, and you're going to get all of the antibiotics. You're going to get the screwed up hormones. You're going to get the genetically modified food that they eat that actually shows up in our digestive system, what they have proven scientifically, and it can also show up in the fetus of a mother that's pregnant.
Wow.
There's a great movie called Genetic Roulette, if anyone wants to know more about that. It's frightening, but it's also really important that everyone knows about this.
Yeah. What's it called?
Genetic Roulette.
Genetic Roulette.
Yeah, there's also another one, I think it's called Seeds of Deception. Is the same Jeffrey, what's his name? I can't remember, but that's enough. You'll know it from there, yeah.
There's a few TED Talks on it. And there's GMO OMG as well.
Oh, yes.
Talks about the effects of genetically modified corn and soy. And wheat, the Monsanto wheat grain and the effects it has on the endocrine system.
It's all from Agent Orange. This is the same stuff they use. Agent Orange. Roundup is the same thing. Yeah, it's frightening.
Yeah, it's
and
horrific.
then things cross-pollinate into organic crops.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be like this fear monger.
Yeah, I know.
But it's just it's important. It's important to be informed, not be inundated. Yeah.
Good to know. Yeah. So in Europe, you had a nice experience.
Yeah.
And then you came back to America, and it was.
Yeah, I got sick.
You got sick.
Mm-hmm.
So just a quick one on the wheat grain in America. It's gone through a process called mutagenesis, and this is when all the proteins have been completely tampered with by man.
Mm-hmm.
I think in Wheat's Belly, he talks about how there's 14 different added proteins now. So the idea is, the idea is so the farmers can yield more in less time. So they used to be 1.5 meters tall crops, and now they're dwarf crops. So they can withstand the weather conditions. Farmers can yield more, less time. Amazing for the agricultural industry, which is subsidized by the government, and not so good for our health.
They rotate the crops faster, obviously.
Right. And then
the soils get more depleted.
Yeah, and then Monsanto's going to monopolize the entire industry with their pretty harmful crops.
Yikes.
Grains. Yeah, so if you're in America,
don't eat grains.
Try not to eat grains.
Those are super organic. I don't even know about that.
Get them shipped over from Europe. Yeah. I do believe that Europeans aren't completely free from all of these.
No, it's definitely, they're invading. They do say that the people that work in the factories in Monsanto won't even eat in the lunchroom. But, my country is Budapest. That's where my father is from. And they burned all the Monsanto fields there. So, yay.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, in various countries, like Norway, they refused everything. They said, this has not been proven safe, therefore, go away.
Yeah.
Whereas in America, they said, it's not been proven dangerous, therefore, we'll do it. That's what happened with the GMO thing.
But yet, I actually have certain herbal formulas that they will not even allow in California because of certain ingredients that might have a carcinogenic element, which is total BS.
Really?
So I had to send it to my mother's house and have her send it here. Yeah, one of my meal formulas.
Wow.
Yeah, silly.
Wow. Okay, that's awesome.
But then you can take Benadryl over the counter and just trip your eyes out. I've taken that half a pill once, and I'm just so out of my gourd. I couldn't believe it.
Serious? Over the counter?
And I'm just so sensitive. Yeah, that's why it's just there's just this disconnect, between big pharma. And
it's funny what's allowed to happen and what isn't. They'll happily put kids on ADHD medication or antidepressants at 7 years old, and then they'll stop them taking something that's perfectly good for you, like a plant medicine.
Exactly, which I was put on too.
Yeah.
I can't say that I can't negate Western medicine completely because there were some times where it just totally saved my butt when I didn't know what was going on, and I remember I went to this one endocrinologist and he was like, you can't practice your stroke or your backstroke or your crawl unless you're floating. And he goes, you, my friend, are drowning, and I'm sending you over to.
Right.
And it helped for a while. But the thing is it's a BandAid. It's not a quick fix. It doesn't get to the root. So it bought me time.
Awesome.
Basically.
Yeah. And I think that's really good to know because they certainly have their place.
There's no shame in it.
Yeah.
People really need to understand. As
Totally.
long as it's not abused and if you're really suffering, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm just a big believer that for anything, for kind of any long-term use of anything, so any kind of illness or chronic disease even, when we take medications consistently, the very notion of taking them consistently throws your body out of balance.
Exactly.
So it can't heal. It can't do what it wants to do. So the more we consistently take stuff, the more toxicity we're putting in our body, the more inflammation and leaky gut happens as a result of it. And then more problems happen later on.
Bingo.
So it's
ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
I've experienced it for sure. Yeah.
And that's why there's so many cases of people going from one drug to the next drug to the next drug to the next drug to the next drug, and it's like it's almost accepted to be on drugs at a later age.
Oh, completely. A couple.
So we have to kind of recondition our own minds to go, hang on, that's not right. Step back. What's going on here? So once we understand that drugs don't heal the root cause and how they are band-aid, as you say, then that's how we learn how to kind of heal our bodies. Well, knowing it helps us to kind of kick us in the right direction to heal our bodies.
Exactly.
That's my belief.
Yeah, and I would add that even if you rotate your supplements and your herbs and stuff like that, your body gets immune to certain things.
Oh yeah, right.
You know, our bodies are very smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Constantly
so I always,
adapting.
you know, when it's like, you know, even with probiotics, I'm constantly switching up my formulas and my strains and stuff like that. Yeah.
Nice.
Shake things up.
Yeah.
Body alert. Yeah.
Variety is the spice of life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I said that. So.
I like it.
So we talked about diet. That's huge. You know, strict supplementation.
Mm-hmm.
Part of diet. So can we talk about the fun thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the fun thing? This is the plant medicine you've been incorporating, or maybe we should go one step back and
talk about exercise.
Okay, let's hit exercise first, because obviously sometimes you're immobilized, so you can't move, can you?
Right. There were times that I didn't. There were a lot of times where I just couldn't. So what I would do is I would just at least get myself to a sauna to sweat.
Yeah.
Now there's cryotherapy, so you can actually shock the body. You can do both things, but infrared sauna was really key, and also
they're amazing. Yeah.
You know, where I put myself in a tank.
Amazing.
So,
do you go to that one on Washington where they cryogenically freeze you?
I went. I go to the one in Santa Monica.
Yeah.
This is part of my class pass, but
okay, nice.
I've walked past there before, and
it's
the same thing, but yeah. Anything to shock your body, but you know, I also believe that your body definitely needs time to rest, but there's also times where you really got to circulate energy, which means doing the opposite of what you want to do. I actually have a friend in Budapest that was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and a brain tumor, and he just got some message that if he just exhausted his body every day, that he would heal. And he literally from morning to night just did not. He was a martial arts guy, and so he just rigorously trained himself, and that's how he healed. And he didn't even alter his diet that much. That dude eats so much bread, but it's another story. But so I kind of kept that message, and there were days where I just did not want to go, but I just forced myself at least to just get there and at least do something, and your body will respond. Not everyone. I mean, I know I was lucky. I've been really sick and I've suffered, but there are people that are really debilitated. They can't even get out of bed. So, this isn't for everyone. This is what worked for me.
Yeah.
But, hot yoga has been really crucial.
Now
I do circuit training, but spinning, whatever. Nice. Being in nature is super important. Grounding, having your feet, foot in the earth, getting the electromagnetic field. I have a grounding mat.
Nice.
In the other room in my desk. Yeah.
Love it. I've got a chapter on that in my book as well.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. So last year at the Bulletproof conference, they're even saying that the electromagnetic field of the earth isn't as strong as it was because of all the pollutants and toxins. So there's actually this like sphere that I held in my hand that creates these charges that helps ground you more. And they're starting to come up with more and more devices like that. So, I mean, I could totally get into this.
That's awesome. But I should have said this at the beginning. We bumped into each other just by chance at Bulletproof. And people who go to this place are typically people who want to kind of totally optimize their health or heal themselves. And Dave Asprey is kind of behind it. So he's a biohacker and giving you all these tips and tricks, gadgets and diets to kind of totally optimize your health. So we don't have that in England, but it's I think what he's done is created a pretty awesome community in that conference. Just so many awesome people presenting these things that help you heal your body. And you mentioned infrared sauna. I've got a friend who's going to be there at the next conference, and he's got these infrared saunas that you can buy for you put in your home, or you got like a personal one that's you just shine one light on you to wake up the mitochondria of your cells, and he's getting amazing results. He offers a full refund. He's never had a single refund.
And is this far infrared or is it near? Because now they're saying
I think it's near.
Near. That's the new jam.
Yeah,
there's always something new.
So people getting just incredible results by going to this thing. So
that takes you to the next topic. I'm gonna run with it because you were just about to say the emotional component, and that was one thing I actually said to Dave Asprey, because he's got body and mind, and I was like, Dave, what about spirit? Yeah. And what about the emotional? Like addressing that part is like crucial to healing, because not only do you have to address the traumas that compromise your immune system in the first place, but just having a disease is traumatizing, and going through the process is really traumatizing. So there's a lot of healing that needs to take place. I mean, once you're in the killing phase, your body's a war zone, and then you got to repair things, and part of it is your psyche. I mean, it's a huge component of it.
Massive.
Yeah. And that's where I've really had a lot of transformation in the last couple months.
Awesome. Yeah. So how have you got this literally in the last few months?
Where I've experienced a major shift. I mean, I've always been working on my emotional body for sure, but in the last few months, I've noticed just a lot of really profound shifts. Dealing with like a lot of family lineage issues, which sounds a little far-fetched, but going to Budapest and kind of witnessing my father's trauma there was like a major turning point for me. But then, as I mentioned, what we've talked about before is Psilocybin, which is a psychedelic mushroom, is now being also almost approved by the FDA to help it's been proven that it helps with trauma, and it also helps with neurological Lyme. It really actually helps with anxiety and depression. And so I started microdosing just because nothing else was working. And this was actually after I had my mercury removed. But even though I went to a biodentist, I had 5 fillings removed at once, and it was like full tilt boogie. I mean, I had
toxicity throughout.
Just so bad.
Wow.
That I was like dreaming of vomiting maggots for months. I couldn't sleep. And then I finally like flew in the towel and went back to psychiatrist again. And this time I was like, I'm going to go the best of the best. I went to the top psychiatrist from Yale, $500 for a half hour. I was like, I just got to do what I got to do. Yeah. Love this man. The first thing he said to me was, some drugs work for some people some of the time.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, I love you. You get it.
Yeah.
And so he prescribed me like a quarter thing of Nadderall, which is a beta blocker, and it got me through a couple weeks. And then I was like, I don't want to go this way. So liposomal glutathione, tons of detoxification. I went off on a tangent because where was I going with this?
We were talking about magic mushroom.
Yes, and so then I found out through my Lyme group that this is what a lot of people have been using. And I experimented in my 20s more recreationally, but still had a lot of profound shifts and insights back then, and it kind of got me on a spiritual path of studying more things. But this was more science-based, and then I really got into the science of it, of how it helps neurological Lyme, and so I started microdosing, and then not microdosing, then actually doing serious journey work where you're really going into the root of the trauma and going in places that you never dreamed that were stuck.
This has
been huge.
Yeah. Wow.
And I'm going to continue.
Yeah,
it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, it's you really got to go there.
Yeah.
But if you really want to get, if you want, living this vital, beautiful life is, it's stretch and it's discipline. And it takes you out of your comfort zone. And
I've learned so much about trauma through my friend Anahita, and also my own experiences as well, and learning about the healing aspects or elements of ayahuasca, because you're talking about how the psilocybin can help you heal the trauma. With ayahuasca, it changes the synapses in the brain, so people can heal their trauma. And I met someone a few weeks ago who's healed fibromyalgia in 3 sessions. I think it was 3 sessions.
Really?
And she'd been suffering for 2 decades.
That's amazing.
So it goes straight to the root with the trauma, how it's stored in the body. It's like stored in trauma, stored throughout, all in the muscle fascia. It's stored in our psoas muscles here, and it's imprinted in the brain. Any kind of trauma, and if we're a walking, talking, breathing human, everyone's got some kind of trauma, some way worse than others, but that's why we can recall these traumatic. It might be an argument with someone, and you can recall it like it's yesterday. And the likes of psilocybin, is it psilocybin?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, psilocybin.
Yeah.
And ayahuasca and other things. They help to change the connections between the neurons, and that's how people can have just phenomenal results with these plant medicines, which for the most part have been banned. And
well, it's finally starting to turn around a little bit.
Yeah, and this is awesome.
I just got an email in my inbox about the Aware project where they're
me too.
with MDMA, and so I'm bookmarking that to look into later. But I'm definitely gonna go to that lecture.
Totally, yeah, it's so interesting. And MDMA, LSD, there's been studies on how they've been helping people heal PTSD and other forms of trauma. But yeah, Ibogaine, of course, getting people off opiates, which are more addictive than any illegal drug.
Mm-hmm.
There's more people addicted to opiates, which are legal amphetamines, than anything else. And people are using iboga to get off these medications and heal their trauma and all sorts. So it's just phenomenal. You've got all these magical plants which have been suppressed, and we are now seeing like them all surface again. And it's,
I mean, they're
amazing?
resilient. They're going to call to us. I mean, plants have an energy, and that's, you know, how the shamans found out about them. I remember one of my mentors a couple years ago, he was like, I asked the shamans, like, you know, how do you know which plants to use? It's only 3, you know, a combination of 3 plants in this like vast Amazonian jungle. How do you know? And they just say, well, the plants tell us.
Yes.
So it's like we have gotten so disconnected in this, you know, media-driven society. We have gotten so disconnected from our earth and from these plants, and it's just so important to tune in. And I am so guilty of it, let me tell you.
Yeah, we
but
all
it's
are.
just nice to know that like there is this movement of going back into that now, which is really great.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
we're going to see more and more on this in the coming years. People, you know, and they're true medicines. I interviewed someone last week. He's been using cannabis, and he's helped a number of cancer patients, quite a few cancer patients. He's helped someone reverse type 1 diabetes, which is almost
doing the oil, the Rick Simpson oil. Yeah.
Not just Rick Simpson, but all sorts of different cannabinoids.
CBD too.
Yeah, CBD, THC. You know, sometimes one is enough. Other times you need both. But
my sense is you need the whole plant.
Yeah.
Keep it as whole as possible. But, you know, that's just my take.
Yeah, and I think it's legalized in 20 odd states here now, and I thought it was 7, but someone else said it's 20 the other day. But it's getting there, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's still illegal in Europe, but it's unless you're in Amsterdam. But yeah, I think we're going to see a huge resurgence.
I tried it in Amsterdam. Those strains are a little too strong. I don't know what they're doing over there.
In Amsterdam.
Like, whoa.
I wouldn't know.
That's another story.
I think it's really exciting what we're going to see in the next coming years, because all of this is happening, and people are coming off medications or pharmaceutical medications. They're finding natural sources. They're healing their body. They're going to the root and changing their diet, changing their approach to their health, and it's really fascinating.
We're fed up, We're fed up of just not having the right answers and just being told. I got told to go. Was it equine therapy, to go play with horses one time from one doctor? I was like, that was a $300 visit, and that's what you're telling me? It's just like. Did you? I did not. I was like, no, I don't want to get any more tick bites. No, that was before I was actually diagnosed. But but I always, I always knew that there was something that I just wasn't getting. There was some part of the equation that I wasn't getting. So
it's been a combination of, you'd say 4 things. Would you say? Diet, physical activity, psychology, and the spiritual component. Would you say that's right?
Yeah.
Accurate?
Yeah, because I guess cleansing and sweating would get in the physical activity. Yes.
Talking of
yes, you're good at recapping.
Yeah. Talking of sweating, one thing I didn't mention before when you're talking about physical exercise, I just wanted to remind people about was the part of the lymphatic system responsible for getting rid of dead cells, like dead cancer cells. Sorry, the part of the immune system is the lymphatic system.
Yeah, in Ayurveda they call it the drains because it's the first layer. And
this doesn't work if you're sedentary.
Yeah. If your drains are clogged, you can't get to the other layers of your body. Yeah.
So the blood circulatory system has a heart to pump all the blood around your body. The lymphatic system, responsible for getting rid of all the dead cells, dead cancer cells, all the drainage, only works if your body is active. So people who are sedentary are often those who get ill all the time. And it's kind of, your friend, the example you gave of your friend healing cancer, like, did you say a brain tumor and pancreatic cancer?
And he did have the operation for the brain tumor, but
Yeah.
there's no guarantees on that.
No,
Yeah, he just exhausted himself to the point of vomiting every day, he said. He just had this message, I don't know how he got it, but that's how he healed himself. Yeah.
Maybe with plant medicine.
Could have done that. Well, he doesn't even, I actually gave him a kombucha once, which is like 0.01 alcohol, and he got so tired. He's a pilot, and he missed it. He was late for his flight. He's so sensitive. He never has touched anything.
Wow.
Except for sugar. He always gets on me. Well, marijuana leads to other things. I'm like, just when you quit sugar, then you can come and talk to me.
Yeah, right.
Because that is the most addictive substance. Probably one of my hardest things to kick was sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was a smoker for 15 years.
Wow.
I drank like a fish at times because I didn't know what was going on with me, and all that stuff I released. But sugar was definitely the hardest. I mean, I grew up in the Midwest. We had tons of processed food. Loved my parents. They did a wonderful job, but they didn't know any better. And they were like, you can only have 3 donuts before your Fruity Pebbles on Saturday. I mean, that's just like a nutritional holocaust.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was an emotional kid. I definitely had the tantrums and all that.
Yeah, and I think what makes it so hard with sugar is because it's so socially acceptable. It's like
it's in everything.
We're brought up that way, and it's normal. You have something wrong with it, or you do something right, you get rewarded with sugar, or you have sugar and dessert after every first course. Often.
Yeah, and I was looking for smoked salmon yesterday. I could not find one that didn't have sugar.
Wow.
Yeah, because I was at like that 365 place, the Whole Foods place. Yeah.
Wow. So the interesting thing about sugar is it ignites the same pleasure center in the brain as heroin and cocaine, and it's why it's equally, if not more, as addictive. So people.
Well, I haven't done heroin, so I can't say.
Yeah.
But I would definitely say it's a highly addictive substance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And once you really neutralize it, you can have it. Like I just read this article from this woman who's a nutritionist, and I think she even went to the same school that I did, Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And she was in Japan, and they have this ritual where they have these sweet balls of sugar before their tea. And this one was like, I don't want to do that. And everyone was like, well, it's kind of like the Buddha, who's a vegetarian, but if he goes to a house where there's meat, he's going to eat it because that's what you do, because it's the courteous thing, and you're in community and family. But she had said that their main ritual for doing this is that so you don't forget about the sweetness of life.
Interesting.
And I kind of really liked that because, I don't think you should just say all or nothing and never, ever, ever have it. I have friends that do, and they live by that, and they...
Miserable.
No, it's actually very vital, and I don't feel deprived, right. But I just don't have that personality type. You know what I mean? So I still will indulge from time to time. Yeah. Right now, I'm actually back onto a really, really strict regime. But my birthday's coming up in a couple weeks, and I'm sure I'll have some tequila. Yeah. Nice. And that's one of the cleanest things, But
and it's an upper. So it's not a downer.
Yeah, and I've gotten so good with learning about sugar-free recipes and cooking with dates and things like that. So if I want to make something, it's not an everyday thing. It's a once in a while thing. No problem.
Awesome. And like you say, the 90-10 rule, 90% of the time you eat awesome stuff, 10% cheap.
Yeah, and you're treating in community, I think, is the best way to do it. It's like if it's Thanksgiving and you love pumpkin pie and you're with your family, that's the time to do it. Yeah. It's not the time to do it when you're feeling guilty or you're in a bad mood and something really bad happened and you're in your bedroom eating a piece of cake under your bed. Yeah. Which, I've done that kind of weird shit too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. No more shame in that.
That's awesome advice. Yeah. Awesome. That's been so interesting. I had something else I was going to say then.
I know. Yeah, a couple more.
It's on the tip of my tongue. So I think we've addressed most of the things we're going to talk about. We talked about that's what I'm going to say about ketosis. If you have a sweet tooth, I think one of the fastest ways to get past the sweet tooth craving is with ketosis, because you can have these amazingly delicious fat bombs with zero sugar in them. It's just loaded with fat, which is tasty. And of course, before the low fat craze, and everyone went low fat, high sugar, and the whole obesity epidemic.
Snack wells? Yeah, that was bad.
Yeah, so all the fat's taken out, it's replaced with sugar spiked through insulin, fat storing hormones, and the whole diabetes epidemic broke out. That was the early 80s, 1984, I believe. Thanks, media. So, so going back to ketosis diet, that's when you load up on fats because it's super tasty. So if you have a sweet tooth craving, you can still have that satisfied, but you have fat instead of sugar.
Well, tell me what you use for that, because sometimes I'll just take a couple tablespoons of coconut butter and coconut oil. I'm like, it's not that tasty, but it sure curbs my.
Have you heard of Erewhon?
Yes. You just go there.
You just buy a chocolate for $9, and
I make my own actually.
Okay, yeah, but there's some brilliant resources that I can send you actually. But there's like the Keto Diet channel, it's awesome.
Yeah, and there's all these. Have you done that?
I've tried those exogenous ketones. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are some hacks that you can get around the sweet tooth craving with. So yeah.
Yeah, I love the Jing. I'll do a plug with people that I don't really know personally, but the Jing Slingers. Do you know them? They're like the herbologists. They used to be at the Erewhon in West Hollywood. Well, they have this book, and they actually start their book out with desserts, and they use either Lancanto, which is the non-GMO erythritol, which is birch or corn derived, mixed with stevia, which is also known to eliminate biofilms. Lyme disease creates, the cells create biofilms, so things are impenetrable, and so it breaks that up. That also happens with parasites, so that they resist antibiotics. So stevia is actually medicinal.
Wow.
So that's one. That's the sweetener I use mostly, Lancanto, if I use it.
Yeah.
And then another one is Sugar Vita, which is type of palm sugar, palm jaggery. So it's really, really highly mineral dense. It has more sugar in it, but the high minerals kind of counterbalance the bad sugar. And they make them with things that have fiber and stuff like that. So it's
interesting.
It's another nice hack.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can share hacks.
Yeah. We'll share hacks.
We'll co-hack.
Co-hacking. Time to co-hack.
Yeah.
We'll go to a co-hacking space. So that's been amazing. Thank you. Could you give your number one piece of advice for anyone suffering from Lyme disease?
My number one piece of advice is that, when the bugs are eating your brain so much that you can't control your thoughts. And I know there's people out there that understand this because, you feel like such a failure because you study all these great spiritual truths and, you just got to feel good and you got to fake it till you make it. When you're that sick, you can't. I mean, I will tell you firsthand, it's really, really, really tough. And so I always said I gave up hope so many times. There were so many times in my life I did not want to live. I would never do anything because I believe that we just have to deal with it on the other end. And I knew this was my teacher, but I never gave up hope. No, yeah. I never gave up. I gave up hope, but I never gave up. Yeah. I always had some stick-to-itiveness. There was always the next thing I was going to try. I never stopped. It's financially crippling, and thank goodness I'm out other side. But even 6 months ago, it was in May, when I moved back to Venice, the mold and the toxins really got to me, and I put this plea out, I don't know if I'm going to ever heal from this, and I did. I really feel like I did it, but I always have to keep an eye on it. Yeah. I always have to have that little vigilance. Yeah.
I look at the village people.
I know. So just not giving up.
Awesome.
You just can't.
And would you be open to people approaching you for advice?
Absolutely.
You've got a website, haven't you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've really been very busy with my design business this last year. So the health business has taken a back seat, but I'm in the process of hiring people because I really want to step it up and help people again. And I am with my design business. I really focus on environmental toxicity in the home also because EMFs are really huge.
This is massive.
Lyme, electromagnetic frequencies are really taking people down and they don't realize it, especially children. They're putting iPads in schools and then they lose their concentration. And kids are discovering this. They just had this study with these kids in, I think it was Norway or Finland, where they just noticed that they didn't have any concentration. So they took two plants, one they put next to a router and the other one they put in another room. Same sunlight, same minerals, same plant, and the one next to the router just died.
That's amazing.
So, wow. I would focus on that. Lead in bathtubs, just
the mold
proper
in
air
walls.
filtration. Some clients are so sensitive they can't even have the natural formaldehyde in wood. So we have to do, the tile wood, which is the porcelain tile. There's the wood shop that I use in Arkansas.
Wow.
Bring things in. So
interesting.
I'm a plethora of information. I'm willing to help anyone that's suffering at this point.
Amazing.
I don't want anyone to go through what I did.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
LED lights, they say that they're super good for you, for the environment, but they're actually not good for the brain. So there's a lot of things,
Talking of the EMFs, well, I went to the Truth About Cancer Live symposium last year, and there was a lot of talk about EMFs. And they say some people when you have cancer, it's about finding out exactly where the toxicity is coming from. And you can you just look, is it nutrition? Is it am I sedentary, or is it environmental? Is it mold? You just do a whole kind of focus on where the toxicity is coming from. Because my new definition of cancer is like a symptom of toxicity in the body and a suppressed immune system, which I've learned, and which can lead to inflammation, which is a kind of toxicity. So it can be environmental toxicity, it could be food toxicity, it could be mental toxicity, other forms of, it could be metals like you're talking about in your teeth, other toxic metals, or it could be drugs in the water supply. There's toxicity coming from somewhere.
Don't get me started on the water.
Yeah, and that's why I spent $4,000 on a water machine.
Yeah.
It's a big thing. It's a number 2 life fuel after oxygen.
Aaron Brockovich calls it liquid cancer.
Really? Yeah. Get a decent water system. So the EMF thing is huge, because some people can be moved. They just move location. They say, when like a holistic doctor or naturopath or something is trying to help someone heal their cancer, they just kind of go down this checklist about looking at with everything. And some people, they've just been moved from one location to another one because they're surrounded by EMFs. And that could be the router, it could be, or router as you say over here, or it could be surrounded, the fuse board or the consumer unit, as we say in England. Like so much electricity changing the EMF, the electromagnetic field, which completely disrupts the electron flow in our bodies. So they talk about not having your phone on if it's in your pocket, putting it into airplane mode, not using Bluetooth devices, because that all messes with your natural electron flow in your body.
Hardwiring your home. Cases. We've phones now too.
We've now hardwired our home, and we don't use Wi-Fi anymore. So there's it's a huge thing. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, there was one instance where a woman used to hold her phone in her bra here.
She did not get breast cancer.
She got breast cancer, 3 tumors in a row.
Oh
yeah. And there's studies of taking petri dishes of sperm, and one you put a phone next to it, and I've not seen this one, but I've been told about this. It's been removed from YouTube, but it's you put a phone next to a petri dish of sperm, of live sperm, and they're dead in 15 minutes. The EMFs from the phone. So there's a whole thing. There's so much studying now going into the effects of EMFs on our bodies, because we're like walking bundles of electricity. We're like every single
things in.
Yeah, so I've become much more vigilant with stuff like that. This is all about that as well. But
I have one. I have holograms on my phone.
Yeah,
I have holograms in my Prius, because they say Prius are EMF machines too, as well, and Teslas.
Because they're giant electrical gadgets. Wow, I'm gonna keep it back. I'm never gonna get.
I got that. I got my Prius, and then right after that, I found this out. I was like, oh.
Wow.
So
Stick to petrol, people.
I know, we gotta figure it out. We gotta figure it out. If we can send someone to the moon, we gotta be able to figure this out.
Right, and Toyota brought
in. I'm not sure about that anyway.
Yeah,
that's another story.
Toyota brought in a water engine. It was featured at the Sustainable Business Award, where I got my award. Yeah, they've brought out a car which runs on water and hydrogen.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I know my brother made gas out of corn once.
Wow. Yeah, there was a Top Gear special where they made gas with vegetable oil.
Yeah.
There's lots of alternatives.
We just gotta stick together and figure it out.
Make it happen.
Yeah.
We move as one.
Yes, that is very true.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. This has
Kristin.
been fun.
Yeah, it's been really interesting, and I'm sure there's loads of information people can use there. So thank you so much for.
Well, it's been an honor. I'm glad I got to finally share my story after all these years.
The website again, Kristin Kilmer.
There's kkwellness.com. That was my later one, so I figured out how to abbreviate, and then my my design website is kristinkilmerdesign.com. Kristin with an I.
I can put a link below this as well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you for watching, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. It's been great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Looking forward to hearing more about these shrooms.
I know. Let's go talk about this.
Yeah. Thanks for watching, everyone. Does anyone have any questions?